Under a crimson sunset over the bay in Seattle, Ethan Ward, a tech millionaire who once thought he could win at everything, drops to his knees before Amelia Brooks. Her voice shakes as she bears the wound. "You took not only my father, but also my unborn child." Tears run down her cheeks in the cold drizzle. Streetlights smear into hazy streaks, like cracks in the polished shell of his life. What began as a seemingly harmless bet on marriage pulls Ethan into a whirl of loss. The company her father built collapsed because of him, leading to her father's death and her miscarriage. How does a man used to control make amends for harm that can't be undone? Can forgiveness truly heal, or is it only a mirage against the hard truth of consequences? This story carries a clear message. Forgiveness can be the key to healing inner wounds. Stay to witness the journey from anger to hope. The Seattle night looked like a somber painting in thick gray ink. Rain drummed the tower's giant windows, leaving long trails like scars on the city's face. Inside, warm light poured from crystal chandeliers and bounced off polished marble. It tried to mask the cold outside with a thin coat of luxury. People moved slowly through the room, murmuring and smiling. Armani suits brushed past glittering gowns. To Ethan Ward, it was all background, familiar, overplayed, and empty. At 50, he leaned against the bar with a glass of whiskey. His eyes scanned the crowd with practiced confidence. He was an American success story, from a garage in Seattle to a tech empire worth billions. His decisions could shake markets, yet behind the half-smile, a tension lived in him. He had won deals and women alike, but felt he was running from himself. Quick romances with perfect women, slim, stunning, easy to please, filled the time, not the void. He still heard echoes of a single mother working 2 jobs. Sometimes success was only a shell over loneliness. Ryan Cole, a college friend and quiet rival, strolled up with a glass of champagne. He leaned in, eyes bright with a private dare. "Hey, Ethan," he said, drawing out the words. "I've been thinking. It's time you faced a real challenge, something money or your boardroom tricks can't buy you out of." Ethan arched a brow. The spark of interest flared like a match in the rain. He consistently ruled the game, and a challenge was fuel. "What kind of challenge are we talking about, Ryan?" he asked, calm but keen. Ryan sipped and smiled. "I bet you can't marry a woman who's the exact opposite of your type. No supermodels, no perfect high society dames. 6 months minimum. Keep it real, no backing out." The rain hammered harder, underscoring the moment like a drum roll. Ethan gave a short, sharp laugh. His heart kicked, not for money, but to prove he could win. "And the stakes?" he asked, voice even, eyes a little proud. $1 million, cash," Ryan said, lifting his glass. "You in, or you chicken out?" For a beat, the world went quiet, just rain and an old ache rising. Ethan saw a younger self, dismissed and hungry, his mother bone-tired but standing tall. Control had built his life. Saying yes meant he still ruled the board. "Deal," he said. His eyes flashed, but a thin line of doubt slid in. He might have just opened the door to a storm. Ryan's smile tilted. "Her name's Amelia Brooks. You'll meet her soon." The name hung over the jazz like a held note. Ethan hadn't heard it before. Yet the look in Ryan's eyes said this wasn't a joke. It might be a game that would cost him his heart. A week later, the rain still fell, steady as old memories. Ryan sent a brief file. Amelia was different in every way. She was full-figured, far from the ideal he saw on red carpets. She once ran a small craft shop on the city's edge. Independent, self-directed, no ties to his world. She had turned down offers from prominent firms and chose a simpler life for her passion. The lines read plain: but the signal was clear. She wouldn't bend easily. Oddly, that didn't push him away. It drew him in. The need to control wrestled with a new curiosity. The night before they met, Ethan stood at the penthouse window, watching the city blur in rain. Streetlights pooled and broke like scattered memories. He pictured the talk ahead. She would notice his wealth, then drift into his orbit, like others before her. She'll come around, he told himself. Then he saw one photo in the file. Amelia with her father, a small businessman who'd gone under in brutal competition. It stirred a long-buried sting, his mother's quiet tears after double shifts. For a moment, he wondered if he was repeating an old mistake, turning life into a deal sheet. Ryan chose a restaurant high atop a historic downtown hotel. Soft light washed over white linen. Red wine waited in the glasses. Inside, it was all elegance. Outside, the rain pressed hard on the glass. Ethan arrived early, composed, a hunter at ease. Yet a question edged in. Was this a bet? Another way to fill a hollow money never touched. The door opened. Amelia Brooks walked in. No timid steps, no scouting glances. She came straight to the table, eyes steady, stride sure. The window's gray light traced her full figure like a slow camera pan. A deep blue dress fit cleanly. Hair pulled back, face clear and firm. No extra shine. No need. "Ethan Ward?" she asked. Her voice was low and certain. "Amelia Brooks," he said, giving a half smile as he stood. Her handshake was firm and calm, a quiet warning. She sat and got to the point. "I know about the bet, the whole thing. I'm here because I've got my reasons." Ethan's brow lifted. He hid surprise with a small smile. He was used to polite dances, not this stripped-down frankness. It stirred his pride and his interest. "What reasons?" he asked, voice calm, eyes narrowing a touch. "Maybe 6 months isn't long, but it's enough for what I need. And if you think you can control me, you're dead wrong." He leaned back and studied her in the dim light. There was no awe in her eyes, no fear. Only a quiet force, like a deep river that doesn't rush but never stops. It made him want to test it, just to see how strong it was. They talked briefly, neither giving ground. He tried a few success stories. She cut in, steady and calm. "Save the sales pitch, Ethan. This isn't a boardroom." When she left, he stayed with the glass gone warm and the rain beyond the glass. For the first time in years, he felt genuine curiosity and a thread of unease. What was she hiding? And was he ready for this game? Outside, the rain kept falling. Somewhere under the jazz and the weather, he heard Ryan's voice again. "I bet you won't win this one." And in the back of his mind, one question rose and stayed. What does she want from me? What does she want from me? The question kept echoing as Ethan Ward left the restaurant, a jazz riff offbeat against the steady Seattle rain. He slid behind the wheel of his gleaming Tesla. One hand gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. The other held his phone. He almost texted Ryan, "She's a tough nut to crack," then stopped. Rain tapped the windshield, trailing long lines like cracks in the shell of success he'd built for years. The city blurred under streetlights. He'd closed countless deals and charmed myriad women. Yet one short meeting with Amelia Brooks felt like a wall he couldn't see, let alone climb. Irritation mixed with a sharp spark of fear he never named. Ethan prided himself on reading people in minutes. It was like market data to him. But with Amelia, his instincts slipped off course. She didn't dodge, and she didn't attack. Her frankness raised an invisible barrier. It made him want to break through and see what stood behind it. By morning, the rain still fell, steady as old memories. He heard his mother's voice from years ago. Don't let anyone push you around. He wasn't going to leave this at one curious night. He wanted to see her again, on ground he could control. He sent a simple text. Lunch today? Your pick. Her reply came within 10 minutes. The Cedar on Pine and 5th, noon. He frowned, pulse ticking faster. The Cedar was a small rustic cafe tucked between two aging buildings and scarred wood tables. Warm cinnamon from fresh bakes. Not his scene. He was used to rooftop views and rare wines. That difference pulled him in. Control wrestled with curiosity, and curiosity won. When Ethan arrived, Amelia was already there. Noonlight filtered through the rain-fogged window and warmed her brown hair to a deep honey. Her whole figure carried a quiet strength, not the perfect red carpet look he knew too well. Steam rose from a mug of tea. A worn notebook lay open beside it. She looked up, nodded once, and offered a polite smile that didn't flinch. I figured you'd pick a fancy rooftop with a view, she said. You're full of surprises. Sometimes you have to switch it up, Ethan answered, pulling out the chair. The cinnamon and the hum of the hand grinder made him feel off balance, like he'd stepped into a movie about a simpler life he'd long forgotten. He liked control. This place, and this woman, put him on the road team. They started with small talk, Seattle's weather, the smell of the roast. After a few minutes, Amelia set down her cup with a soft clink and looked him square in the eye. If we're doing this, I need to set some ground rules, she said. I'm all ears, Ethan replied, folding his arms, leaning in. I don't want your money. 6 months means 6 months, and I walk away the same way I came in. I have my work, my friends, my life. I won't let anyone, including you, interfere with that. Her voice was calm but honed, like a well-sharpened blade. Ethan held his tongue and watched her eyes. They didn't blink. Her hand rested lightly on the notebook, as if the words were already written. A photo peeked from the pages, her and an older man. Her father, he guessed. A hint of a past he didn't know yet. And if I don't agree, he asked, testing the edges. Then this bet's over right now, she said, steady as stone. Ethan smiled, not in mockery, but from rare respect. Few people set terms with him. Fewer held the line without fear. He was used to winning. The smile hid a deeper worry, being turned down. Rain quickened against the glass, beating time to his pulse. They left the cafe without another word. The breeze carried cool, damp air and the scent of waffles from the shop next door. Two figures walked side by side, close in step but distant in thought. Amelia didn't hurry. She moved at the slow pace of someone who owned her time. Ethan noticed. The contrast tugged at him. He wanted to conquer, yes, but change? That was harder. Before they parted, she turned back. You think this is about control, she said. For me, it's about freedom. Then she was gone, leaving him on the wet sidewalk with her words looping like background music. That night, Ethan sat alone in his penthouse living room. The city spread below like a grid of stars. Most nights, the view made him feel like a general surveying his ground. Tonight, it brought back Amelia's eyes, clear, steady, not for sale, and then his mother's face, tired and proud, after long shifts that stole her sleep. His phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Met your untouchable lady yet? Got a plan to crack her? Ethan looked at the screen and let a half-smile slip. He didn't have an answer. He did know one thing. This had already moved beyond a bet. He wasn't going to quit. What he didn't see yet was simple. He wasn't pulling her into his game. He was stepping into hers. Outside, the rain thickened. Heavy drops marked the glass, one after another, as if warning that a real storm was on its way. Seattle's night rain kept tapping the penthouse windows. Ethan Ward set his whiskey down with a soft clink and stared at the skyline. Towers rose and faded in the damp haze, like ghosts from an old life. Amelia's words on the sidewalk still echoed. For me, it's about freedom. The line felt like a warning and a dare. He was used to control, billion-dollar deals, brief romances, a wins-only record. Now it felt like he'd stepped into a game without knowing the rules. His reflection hovered on the fogged glass, steady on the outside, uncertain within. Was this bet a reminder of losses he'd buried since childhood? He heard his mother again. Don't ever let him see you sweat. Morning brought a short text from Amelia. If you're still in, Saturday, St. James Cathedral, 11 a.m. The wedding. Ethan read it twice, a smile tugging at his mouth. No dress fittings, no press. She was sending a message. I don't belong to your world. It stung his pride and stirred a quiet fear he wouldn't name. Saturday arrived under a gray veil. St. James rose from the mist like carved stone in an old film. Inside, wooden pews lined a narrow aisle. Dim light passed through stained glass, solemn and extraordinary. Only a few witnesses stood by. Ryan Cole with a half-smile, a quiet friend of Amelia's, and an elderly pastor whose voice carried a gentle weight. Amelia entered in a deep blue dress that swept the floor. A small lavender bouquet rested in her hands. She moved with the calm of someone who had known loss and kept going. At the front, Ethan waited in a fitted gray suit. His smile was thin, more contracted than romantic. Somewhere under it, an old ache turned. His mother's short marriage, a divorce that taught him to distrust promises. The vows went by fast. No long handclasp, no dreamy gaze. The pastor declared them husband and wife. Amelia gave a slight nod. Ethan offered an incredible smile, like a deal closed. A question rose in him anyway. Was this a win, or his first blind move on a crowded board? That day, Ethan's penthouse became their home. Afternoon light washed over glass and steel. Custom pieces filled the rooms. Soft Italian leather, a pricey abstract painting, every detail curated. Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets, waiting for the awe. Most people paused, dazzled, then yielded. Amelia looked around once and walked to the window. 6 months, Ethan. Not a day more, she said. The tone was firm. The line was final. Ethan stepped closer, slow and sure. We'll see who folds first. That night, he played his opening card, a long table dressed in white, candlelight, rare red wine, a chef's best work, course after course. Amelia ate a little, thanked him, and excused herself. The moment stung like cold water. He pushed back at the feeling, remembering gifts his mother once refused. Money can't buy everything. The next day, he tried diamonds. The set had been his mother's. Memory turned it tender in his hand. Amelia glanced at it and said, "It's beautiful, but it isn't me." The more she refused, the more he pressed. He trimmed her hours at the craft shop. "You're my wife now. You don't need to hustle," he said, scheduling long meetings over her plans with friends. He was shifting the board, or so he thought. Amelia didn't rise to the bait. She moved around each block with quiet ease, changing appointments, slipping past his traps like water through fingers. He felt the chill of it. Control wasn't landing. Maybe he was making the wrong moves. One evening, Ethan came home late from a meeting. Amelia sat in an armchair under warm light, reading with a blanket at her feet. The picture was simple, still, and unfamiliar to him. He set his coat aside and stood in front of her, looking for a way to turn the tide. "I don't get you, Amelia. he said. Most folks would jump at what I'm offering. Why make it so hard? She looked up and met his eyes. I'm not a pawn in your game, Ethan. You can buy almost anything. Respect isn't for sale. If you haven't learned that yet, these 6 months are going to feel very long. Her words cut clean through his pride. He stood there a moment, then walked to his office, steps heavy, jaw tight. For the first time in years, the board didn't look like his. Outside, the rain thickened, sliding down the glass in dull streams. Amelia set her book aside and stepped to the window. In the reflection, Ethan stood behind her, silent, eyes set on a new plan. A corner of her notebook showed a folded letter from her father, a hint of purpose he hadn't seen. She didn't turn around. You think you're calling the shots, she said softly, but sometimes the king is just a pawn who doesn't know he's already in check. Ethan paused. The calm in her voice told him what the words did not. The game was deeper than he had guessed. Thunder rolled far off. A storm was coming, not only across the city, but into the marriage they had just signed. Thunder from moments ago still echoed against the penthouse glass, a reminder of storms Ethan Ward had always met with control, over deals, over people. He stood still, replaying Amelia Brooks's words. Sometimes the king on the board is just a pawn who doesn't know he's already in check. The line drilled into him, scraping pride and stirring a quiet fear of being pushed into defense. Under the cool office lights, his reflection on the walnut desk looked steady, but small cracks showed. He wasn't used to playing from behind. In billion-dollar negotiations, Ethan wrote the rules and moved the pieces. Here, Amelia was doing the opposite, and she did it gently, almost without a trace. He wondered if this was the consequence of past hard calls, when he cut rivals loose without a thought for their lives. Days passed like an unspoken chess match. The rain beat harder on the windows. Ethan started with small, calculated moves. He stacked his meetings on top of Amelia's plans with friends, leaving her alone when his assistant happened to stop by with probing questions. He sent expensive gifts to her craft shop, knowing they'd spark gossip and put her in a bind. He even changed the penthouse Wi-Fi password, for security's sake, so she would have to ask him. Each move met a quiet answer. Amelia turned on her phone's hotspot and kept working. Friends shifted meetups to places he couldn't touch. For every delivery, she sent back a line. Thanks, but no thanks. He felt like he was swinging at air. The silent resistance pulled up an old lesson from his mother. Real strength lives in resilience, not showy power. One night, he came home late. Warm light pooled over an armchair where Amelia read, a thin blanket tucked at her feet. The simple scene felt like a life he'd never known. He watched her a moment, then tried to hide his irritation behind a dry edge. You think that matters more than what I can give you? He asked. Most folks would jump at this life. Why make it so hard? She looked up, calm and clear. It matters because it's mine, Ethan. You can own the world, but that doesn't mean you own me. Keep squeezing, and you'll end up with empty hands. The words landed hard. He turned away, setting a new goal inside himself. One way or another, she would yield. A shadow trailed the thought, his father's need to control, and how it cost him everything. The next day, Ethan took the game outside the penthouse. He called a few investors who knew her clients and applied pressure. A couple of key orders fell through. He expected her to bend. 2 days later, she filled the gap. A local magazine ran her on the cover, not for looks, but for a community project she led that helped local makers find new markets. The headline read, "Redefining Value in a Tech World." The piece mentioned her father, a small businessman who had gone under years ago. Ethan felt a brief, sharp pang. He studied the magazine like a failed earnings report. She wasn't just defending, she was advancing, and doing it in public. He couldn't hit back without looking like the villain. The question returned, was his power real, or a shiny shield over loneliness? That night, dinner was quiet. Silverware tapped porcelain in small, careful sounds. When he set down his glass, Amelia spoke. "You can keep pushing," she said, "but every time you do, you prove one thing. I'm stronger than you think." He held her gaze and finally understood. This wasn't personal anymore. It was a contest of principles, his need for power against her claim to freedom. There would be no quick end. Outside, rain thickened and slid down the glass in long, dull lines. Amelia rose and walked to the window. Her silhouette etched itself against the dark. "The storm's just starting," she murmured. Ethan's hand closed into a fist. A cold light flashed in his eyes. To win this game, he would go farther than he ever had before. Thunder from earlier still echoed against the penthouse windows. It reminded Ethan Ward of storms he had outlasted by staying in control. Now the words Amelia Brooks had left him. "The storm's just starting," kept circling back. He stood very still, letting each word sink in. Pride pushed one way, a quieter fear pushed back. Was he repeating his father's mistake, forcing life into his grip until it broke? Under the soft lamp, his glass caught the light. His reflection looked steady, but small cracks showed. This wasn't surface friction anymore. Amelia wasn't just resisting control. She'd built a wall around herself. Solid, calm, with no opening he could find. The rain thickened outside, marking time like a distant drum. At dawn, Amelia rose early. Gray light washed the penthouse in a calm tone. When Ethan stepped out, she already wore a simple beige coat, hair pinned back. Her whole figure carried an easy strength he didn't see at parties. He paused, kept his voice even, and watched her closely. "You got plans this morning?" he asked. "Just work," she said. No extra detail. Warm tone, firm edges. He searched her face for signals and found none. She gave a small, polite smile, then walked out with a sure step. The door clicked shut, leaving a quiet that pricked at him. He was used to reading people fast. With her, it felt like running in fog. All morning, he failed to focus. It felt like the old days waiting for his mother's late shift to end. He hired discreet security to follow Amelia, not from jealousy, he told himself, but because he needed to know. The report came back by email. Everything looked ordinary. A meeting with older women at the Cedar Cafe. Papers exchanged. A warm smile, then she left. The plainness set him even more on edge. One small note stood out. She drew an old letter from her bag and held it close. That night, dinner waited under candles. He tried to turn the board with talk. "You seemed busy today," he said, voice calm, eyes alert. Amelia looked up from her salad with a brief, passing smile. "Just some personal projects, nothing to do with you." She set her fork down, light but final, a line in the sand. The next day, he tried a different move. Instead of blocking, he opened doors. "Use my car whenever you want," he said. He also placed a new bank card in her name on the table. The balance could change anyone's life. Amelia turned the card under the window's soft light, then set it back. "Thanks, but I don't need it." The words were gentle, the refusal heavy. He felt himself pushed back a step. Freedom might matter to her more than any offer he could make. One evening, he found her by the window seat. A worn brown leather notebook rested in her hands. The lamp threw clean lines of light and shadow across her face. "What's that about?" he asked, trying for light. "You always writing in there?" She closed it with a small snap and set it aside. Just for me? The wall wasn't only in her tone. It lived in what he could not touch. A private world she guarded like something precious. He stepped onto the balcony and watched the city shine through the rain. A tricky question formed. If she didn't want him inside her world, why agree to the marriage? And what was in that old letter the team had noticed? The question stayed with him all night. Sleep came in short flashes. He saw past deals that spun out of control and the consequences that followed. Morning came. Amelia was already gone. On the table, near a still warm cup, lay a small note. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." He picked it up and gripped it until the crease held. A sharp hunch struck him. The wall wasn't only keeping him out, it was hiding something that could change the whole board. Was he ready to face the consequences of what he'd set in motion years ago? He looked out the window. The rain had eased, but dark clouds still rolled over the city. The real storm wasn't past. It hadn't even hit yet. The morning sky over Seattle was overcast, but no rain fell. It felt like a gray curtain hiding old memories Ethan Ward avoided. He stood by the wide window of the penthouse. Amelia Brooks's handwritten note lay on the table behind him, next to a cold cup of coffee. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." 8 words, and his whole day ran on edge. He wanted control. He feared what her wall of silence might be hiding. Ethan wasn't the type to wait and hope. Near noon, he called one of his private security men. Not out of jealousy, he told himself, but to know what stood outside his reach. Minutes later, the first report pinged his phone. Amelia was in an old neighborhood, walking into a red brick building with no clear sign. She stayed more than an hour. One detail stood out in a photo. She held an old letter close. He opened satellite maps on his laptop and zoomed in. The place had once been a small company's office. It had been closed for years. Then he saw the link that made his hand shake. 8 years ago, his empire bought that firm and shut it down. He had almost forgotten the deal, just numbers on a balance sheet. Now a question pressed in. Were those cold choices circling back as consequences? Amelia came home later than usual. The warm lamp lit his face as he waited. She hung her coat, calm and steady. "You had a long day, huh?" he said, voice low. She turned and met his eyes. "You had me followed?" He leaned forward. He didn't deny it. "I want to know what you were doing in that building." She stood still a moment, then stepped closer. "You don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" "That was my father's company," she said, a bitter smile touching her mouth. "You or your empire bought it, crushed it, and shut it down. You don't remember because it was just business to you. For me, that was the day my family's world fell apart." Her words hit hard. Images from years ago flashed by. A clean buyout, black and white numbers. A weaker rival will be gone in weeks. He had never pictured the people behind the paper. He only watched profits climb. Now the cost showed up with a face. "Amelia," he started, voice rough. "My dad didn't just lose the business," she said, cutting in. "He lost his pride, then his health. And a few months later, he lost his life." Silence filled the room. Ethan's hand tightened on the chair. His heart thudded the way it did after a bad quarter. Only this was genuine remorse. "I took this bet," she went on, steady and clear, "because I wanted you to feel what it's like to be controlled, to lose your grip. 6 months is enough for you to learn how a cage feels, even if it's gilded." He swallowed. The words scraped going down. "If your goal was to make me regret, you succeeded," he said softly. "You've got me thinking." "Regret only counts if it leads to change," Amelia said. She turned and walked toward the bedroom, slow and sure. He watched her go and felt loss rise beside a sharp awakening. This wasn't a game to win or lose. It was a fight to reclaim something he hadn't known he needed. He stepped onto the balcony and looked at the city under dark clouds. For the first time in years, he didn't feel above it all. A new thought flashed like lightning. The surveillance note had one more line. The old letter carried the words, "For my lost child." There was a deeper pain here, one that could change everything. Had his choices helped set that in motion? Ethan turned back to his desk and narrowed his eyes. He would find out all of it, whatever the consequences. Thunder cracked close, shaking the glass. His fist closed tight. The real storm wasn't over. It was coming straight for him. Thunder from earlier still hums against the penthouse glass. It reminds Ethan Ward of storms he used to outlast by staying in control. Now Amelia Brooks's warning, "The storm's just starting," runs on a loop in his head. He has faced hard-nosed CEOs and veteran negotiators. None of them squeezed him like this. He stares at the city through a film of breath on the window and feels power slipping. If this keeps up, he'll lose. Not just the bet, but the quiet war for control. Morning comes. Amelia leaves early without a word. The door shuts, and silence settles. This time he doesn't send a tale. He chooses a different move. Confront the truth head on. When she returns that evening, the apartment feels like a stage. Warm lights are gone, replaced by a cool, white glare. A formal dinner waits, untouched. Ethan sits straight at the head of the table. In front of him rests a thick black folder. "We need to talk," he says. Amelia hangs her coat and studies the room. "You dug deeper, huh?" Her voice stays calm, guarded. Ethan slides the folder across the table. "I looked into the old deal with your father's company. It isn't as simple as I thought." She narrows her eyes and touches the file without opening it. "What do you mean?" He leans in, hands tight. "The man who drove that buyout hard wasn't me calling every shot. It was Ryan Cole. He used his position, and my trust, to twist it into something destructive. There's reason to believe he targeted your family on purpose." The room goes very still. A clock ticks, loud as a heartbeat. Amelia opens the file with a slight tremor. Inside, an old email from Ryan reads, "Cut him off at the knees." The pages suggest a personal grudge against her father. She gives a small, bitter smile. "You think blaming Ryan changes anything?" "I'm not denying my part," Ethan says. "I signed off. I profited. But if you want justice, Ryan has to answer for this too. Give me a chance. Let me help you end it." Amelia holds his gaze for a long moment. She knows his tricks, sugar-coated traps and pressure plays. This feels different. Behind the strategy, she hears something else. Genuine remorse. She doesn't sleep in the primary bedroom that night. Instead, she sits in the reading room under a warm lamp, the file open on the desk. The first page shows Ryan shaking hands with a shadowy partner in a dim bar. Ethan stands in the doorway and doesn't enter. He understands this is a hinge moment. Either she lets him earn back trust, or she closes the door for good. Morning breaks clear and cold. Amelia steps out in her beige coat, eyes steady. "If you're telling the truth," she says, "we'll do it my way." "I'm ready," Ethan answers, voice low. "Good," she replies, a quick, resolved smile. "Because I just set up a meeting with Ryan, and you're coming." Ethan nods, but his chest tightens. In the file, a handwritten note from Ryan reads, "Make it personal." He doesn't know whether Amelia will stand beside him, or use that meeting to deliver the final blow. Beyond the windows, dark clouds gather along the horizon. A real storm is moving in, outside the penthouse, and between the three people walking toward the most dangerous move on the board. The sky over Seattle hung heavy with dark clouds. No rain yet, but it felt close. Ethan Ward buttoned a charcoal shirt in the penthouse mirror. Amelia Brooks's words rang in his head. Regret only counts if it leads to change. His hands shook a little. He heard his mother, too. You can't fix what's broken if you don't face it. From the living room came Amelia's steps. She was neat and composed, her hair pinned up, her eyes steady. Today's meeting with Ryan Cole felt like a turning point. The ride over was quiet. The car slipped through wet streets and neon glare. Ethan glanced at Amelia, hoping for a sign. Her face gave none. They chose a cafe at the top of a glass tower. The city spread below like a blanket of lights. The elevator chimed. Ryan was already there by the window, relaxed, an espresso in hand. Amelia, Ethan, this is a surprise, he said with a thin smile. Didn't expect you two to team up so soon. Ethan pulled out a chair. The legs scraped the floor. He kept his jaw tight. Amelia set her bag down and didn't waste time. Cut the small talk, Ryan, she said. I want the truth about my dad's company. From you. Ryan took a slow sip. Truth? It was business, Amelia. No one forced anything. Your father signed. And Ethan here, he tipped his head toward Ethan, made a fine profit. End of story. Ethan leaned forward. So, the cancelled contracts? The loans were pulled at the last minute. All coincidence? Amelia didn't blink. And you just happened to target my family? Ryan laughed under his breath. Coincidence or not, it doesn't matter now, does it? It didn't matter. Ethan felt his face flush and kept his voice even. It matters, Ryan. It shows you pulled the strings. You owe Amelia and her family an apology. Ryan's eyes sharpened. He crumpled the edge of his newspaper. Don't forget who signed every paper, Ethan. You took the rewards, too. Playing hero now? A little late. Silence pressed in. Sunlight edged through the clouds and cast a glow on the table. Amelia watched them both, weighing every word. Ryan stood first. Remember this. In this game, no one's innocent. He walked away. As he turned, a corner of an old photo slipped from his pocket. Amelia's father, younger and proud. Then he was gone. The room felt larger and somehow quieter. Amelia faced the window. A narrow band of light broke through the clouds, faint but discernible. You were right, she said softly. Ryan's part of it. But you, she met Ethan's eyes. You still have to own your piece. I know, he said, and I will. The light touched her face, easing the complex set of her gaze for the first time. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a small opening. On the drive back, neither spoke. The streets were drying. When the car stopped at the penthouse, Amelia paused at the elevator. If you want to change, she said, this is your last shot. She stepped inside. The doors closed. Ethan stood there with a thin thread of hope and the weight of what was ahead. Outside, the clouds gathered again. That thin band of light could vanish at any moment. The work of forgiveness had only begun. The elevator chimed softly as the doors closed behind Amelia Brooks. Ethan Ward stayed in the penthouse lobby, staring at the steel panels. His fist was tight, his jaw set. Her words rang in his ears. If you want to change, this is your last shot. A short line, but it hung over him like a sentence. Last shot sounded light. It felt like stone. He had seen a first thin ray of hope with Ryan. Now distance returned. That night, Amelia didn't come down for dinner. The kitchen sat quietly under warm light. The food stayed untouched. Ethan ate alone, each bite caught in his throat. He wanted to break the wall between them. He feared what lay behind it, wounds he couldn't heal. He thought of his mother working herself sick, and of the thank you he never said. The next day, he went to the office and couldn't focus. Papers drifted across the desk. Calls faded into noise. He left early and drove to a small cemetery outside Seattle. Rows of tall trees moved in the calm fall wind. The first drops ticked on the windshield. He walked the wet gravel path and stopped at a simple headstone with Amelia's father's name. Fresh lavender held the last of the morning dew. Ethan stood a long time and said nothing. In his mind, 100 sentences formed. I'm sorry I wrecked your work. I'm sorry I turned your family's pain into profit. He knelt and set a bunch of white peonies beside the lavender. Amelia loved them. He had once bought the same flowers for his mother's last birthday. The scent rose, gentle and sharp, and his eyes burned, though no tears fell. That evening, rain came down hard. Amelia sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open. The file from before lay beside it. Ethan walked in, steps heavy on the wood floor. "What are you working on?" he asked, voice rough under the drum of rain. "I'm going through the list of companies you took over," she said. "You want to change? Start by fixing what you broke." He pulled out a chair and sat. "I will." "It's not about writing checks to look good," she said, setting the laptop aside. "Face them, hear their stories, feel it when they turn you away." He swallowed. Thunder rolled closer. "If that's what it takes, I'll do it." In the days that followed, Amelia wasn't as cold, but the distance stayed. They talked more, and every question cut into a past he had avoided. It felt like short flashbacks stitched into the present. One night, they sat on the balcony, wind pushing against the railing. The city spread below like a field of sparks. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. Ethan turned. His heart picked up. "What is it?" "When my dad's company went down," she said, eyes fixed on the dark sky, "I didn't just lose him. I lost a child too." The air split. Ethan froze, words stuck in his throat. You were..." She gave a slight nod. "The stress, the loss, it all piled up. I miscarried. And you were part of every reason why, even if indirectly." He sank back in his chair. His hands shook the way they had when he first heard his mother was gone. The regret that already weighed on him became a boulder in his chest. He tried to speak. Amelia stood and went inside, her steps slow and heavy. Outside, rain began to tap the railing again. Each drop felt like it dug a little deeper into the wound she had revealed. Ethan sat alone in the sweeping space, small against the night. Rain from earlier still tapped the penthouse railing, keeping time with Ethan Ward's racing heart. Amelia Brooks's words wouldn't fade. "I lost a child too." He stayed in the balcony chair, the cold wind on his face, the door closing behind her like a slow, fading cue. "You were there, even if indirectly, hung in the air, heavy as stone." He wanted to make it right. He feared every effort might only deepen the wound. He had lost big deals, been betrayed, and watched millions vanish in a market crash. He had never felt this small. There was no contract to sign, no number to fix, no money large enough to balance the scale. Only the hard truth she had opened. He wondered if that first ray of hope after Ryan had been real, or wishful thinking. At dawn, Amelia left without a word, a fresh bundle of lavender in hand. On the kitchen table, beside a cold cup, lay the folder she'd worked on, a list of companies and people his empire had hurt. Names, addresses, handwritten notes, an indictment in black and white. Ethan sat and turned the pages with an unsteady hand. Each name held a story, a shop owner who lost her livelihood after a cold buyout. A family pushed into bankruptcy when a contract died overnight. A team was laid off without warning because he'd approved it on a clean report. It wasn't just her list. It was a ledger of lives he had stepped over to climb. He knew where to start. He also feared that apologies might reopen scars instead of healing them. The next day, he drove to a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle and stopped at a small bakery with a weathered sign. The fall wind bit at his cheeks. "Mr. Ward, what are you doing here?" the owner asked, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes. She gripped a dish towel like a shield. "I came to apologize," he said, slow and firm, "and to make up for what I took away." She stood silent, then let out a short, bitter sound. "Your sorry doesn't bring back the 10 years I lost." "I know," he said, meeting her eyes. "If you'll let me, I want to invest back in, get this place running the way you dreamed. No strings." She didn't answer at once, but her grip eased. The ice in her gaze thinned. Redemption wouldn't come in one visit. It would be a road, not a moment. In the weeks that followed, Ethan went everywhere the list led. A damp woodshop by the docks, a law office that had folded after a lawsuit he'd backed from a distance. He brought money, but also time. He listened. Faces marked by years told him what had broken. More than once he heard, "You ruined my life, but thanks for coming back." For the first time, he didn't show up as an investor. He showed up as a man. Some people turned him away, and the no hit hard. He thought of his mother's grave and chose to keep going. Each evening, he returned to the penthouse at dusk and set a small photo on his desk. Pictures with those he'd faced, half smiles under streetlights. At first, Amelia said nothing. She only glanced and walked on. But the photos multiplied, and her gaze lingered a beat longer each time. One showed a child grinning beside his father. It caught her. It made her wonder if Ethan was changing. One night, after a wet trip to Tacoma, he found Amelia on the balcony with a steaming cup of tea. The air carried a soft salt smell. "Long day in Tacoma," he said. "You look beat," she answered, steady but gentler than before. "They forgive ya?" "The Sanders family," he said. "They said they're moving on." She nodded and fell quiet. The city spread beneath them, lights flickering like small promises. The wall around her showed thin cracks in the moonlight. Later, Ethan sat alone in his office. A few names on the list remained. He tightened his grip on the pen. For the first time since the bet began, he wasn't playing to win. He was fighting to reclaim something he hadn't known he needed. Outside, the rain had stopped. Along the horizon, a dark band of cloud began to form. He looked at the final name, the hardest one, a woman who had once been his mother's friend. Consequences were coming full circle. He pressed the papers flat, his pulse loud as near thunder. Tomorrow would be the hardest meeting of his life. The last name on the list lay there under the desk lamp, a dark mark he couldn't ignore. Ethan Ward sat still, staring at the page like it was his final verdict. He had met everyone else. He had apologized, watched cold eyes soften in small-town sunlight. But this name, Amelia Brooks, brought the storm back. She wasn't a stranger. She was the woman he loved, the one who had revealed a deeper wound. Could an apology ease that past, or only make it hurt more? At dawn, Ethan woke before Amelia. Gray light sifted through the curtains. He made a simple breakfast, hot black coffee, crisp toast, and a fresh bundle of lavender set in the center of the table. He'd cut it from a small garden he'd visited on his road to make things right. An older woman there had spoken of Amelia's father as a forgiving man. He had once written, "Forgiveness is the key to moving on." Ethan held on to that hope. Amelia stepped out, hair still carrying a clean hint of soap. Her gaze paused on the lavender. "Something special today?" she asked. "Or you just trying to butter me up?" He pulled out her chair. "There's one last name on that list," he said, "and the person I need to face is you." She sat but didn't touch the coffee. Her hands held the table's edge. "How are you planning to apologize to me? A check? Pretty words to tie it up?" He shook his head. "Number, I want to tell you everything. No holding back. Then you decide what I deserve." They sat across from each other for more than an hour. Time felt slow. Ethan told it straight, from the buyout of her father's company to every signature he'd made without weighing the cost. He spoke about chasing wins to bury a hard childhood, about taking control because it kept the pain quiet. He didn't polish it. He didn't blame anyone else. His voice roughened when he reached the child she lost. "I was blind, Amelia," he said. "Chasing wins without seeing the cost." Amelia listened. Sometimes her eyes were sharp. Sometimes she stared into the cooled coffee, fighting her pull between old anger and the small hope his recent steps had lit. When he finished, the room fell quiet. Wind moved outside the glass. "Ethan," she said at last, low and steady, fingers tightening around the lavender. "You can't bring back my dad. You can't give me back the child I lost. But I see you've changed. And I think my dad would want me to see that too." His heart kicked. "Does that mean—" "It means I'm ready to leave the past behind," she said. "Not to forget, but to build something new, if you're really in." Morning light crossed the table and warmed their hands. Ethan reached for hers, gently. It wasn't possession. It was a promise. A month later, the 6-month mark arrived. There was no farewell, no slammed door. Instead, a small ceremony at sunset by the bay in Seattle. They stood side by side, not for a wager, but because they chose each other. Amelia wore her deep blue dress. Ethan kept a simple gray suit. Ryan Cole didn't show. He'd slipped out of the city after the old deal's evidence came to light. Ethan no longer cared. The past had been faced. The road ahead was the point now. One late afternoon, with the water turning gold under the falling sun, Amelia rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, smiling, "Who would have thought? It all started with a bet." Ethan held her close. "And ends with the best thing I ever won." The last light washed over them. City lights flickered on. Waves tapped a gentle rhythm at the pier, reminding them that after every storm, there's still tomorrow, and they would step into it together, carrying hope born from truth and forgiveness. Under a crimson sunset over the bay in Seattle, Ethan Ward holds Amelia Brooks as their 6 months come to an end. Not because of a wager, but because real love grew from deep wounds. From the loss of her father and her child, to his long road of honest apologies, they pushed past judgment and found forgiveness, the key that heals a restless heart. When we sow cruelty, we harvest loneliness. When we sow grace, we harvest hope. The hard truth of consequences reminds us that respect and standing against prejudice builds the ground where real change can grow. Thank you for staying with us to the very end. Our next video will bring more meaningful stories worth your time. If this moved you, please share the video, subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter, and leave a like and a comment. Help spread a message of forgiveness to make the world kinder. Are you ready to plant a seed of kindness today? As the rain fades under sunset, hope still shimmers.